Hi, my name is Katey, and much like Naomi Klein, I'm somebody who considers myself an anti-capitalist leftist. However, Naomi Klein is somebody that I have never read from before, but I was interested in this book when I found out it was about the one and only Naomi Wolf. Because back when I was like 19 or 18, before I was politicized at all, the very first book that I read on politics at all, to be perfectly honest with you, but on feminism in particular, was The Beauty Myth by Naomi Wolf. But as most of us will know, since publishing this book, Naomi Wolf has dove right off into the deep end of alt-right conspiracy theory. So a few weeks ago, I started reading this book in this big video project that I did. And in that video, I got about halfway through the book and I spoke at length about how much I was enjoying it. So if you haven't already seen that video, I would highly recommend checking it out, especially the end part where I talk about this book. And in particular, if you want to hear some of the great things I thought about the book, my really positive thoughts. Because here in this video, we're going to be exploring some of my issues with this book. Ultimately, this is a book about conspiracy theory and the alt-right, especially in the last 5 or so years, and how Naomi Wolf has found herself at the center of all of that. And it's all done through the lens of Naomi Klein, basically looking at Naomi Wolf as this mirror image of herself in what she calls the mirror world. She seeks to reflect back a lot of her personal learnings and gleanings from this experience of kind of witnessing Naomi Wolf, somebody she superficially has quite a bit in common with, and she extrapolates that to a larger conversation about politics and society more generally, and in particular what the left can learn from all of this. In so doing, this book covers so much ground. It's honestly hugely ambitious in scope, but tying it all together and at the heart of it is Naomi Klein's doppelganger, Naomi Wolf, and her descent from neoliberal feminist to alt-right conspiracy theorist. And I really enjoyed the process of Naomi Klein tying all of these things together and really putting them up to a spotlight for us to analyze. However, there were also things about this book that I just felt were kind of lacking a little bit. From pretty early on in this book, there was something kind of niggling at me that wasn't sitting quite right, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And I figured I still had plenty of the book left to go. Maybe Naomi Klein would fill in those gaps as I went. And some of them she certainly did. Others she didn't. And so with all of that said, we're now going to dive right into the meat of this video. It starts out with a reading vlog of me talking about, some of my thoughts as I'm going. And then towards the end of the video, we'll have a good chat about my overall thoughts about how this book succeeded, but also where it fell short. So it's Thursday afternoon. Ollie is sitting over here, just out of reach of the camera. And I have been just enjoying a pretty lazy morning and early afternoon and reading Doppelganger. And oh my gosh, I don't know, I'm having a lot of pretty big feelings about this book, in particular the last chapter that I just read. For those of you following along at home, I just read the chapter called Autism and the Anti-Vax Prequel. Now, I don't know how personal and specific I want to get, but this chapter it was very difficult to read, and it just got me thinking so much. I suppose, to put it bluntly, I have been recently diagnosed as autistic. It's been kind of like the last year process of starting to realize that I was misdiagnosed bipolar after my suicide attempt in 2013. And so obviously I've been processing a hell of a lot along with kind of figuring this out for myself. And so having this new word and these new terminologies around autistic has just made me kind of feel like I wish I and my caregivers had this word when I was young, because maybe then I could have had some of the support and care that actually would have helped me learn to regulate and take care of myself rather than internalizing a bunch of shame and self-hatred. But reading this last chapter, which essentially explores the pipeline, I suppose, from, the 90s and 2000s and more recent times of this autism, anti-vax conspiracy theory to what has become like COVID conspiracy theory, anti-vax stuff, and how so much of the language and the rhetoric is very similar. She talks a lot about the history of the autism anti-vax movement and like the language around it, people saying that they're like the vaccine stole their child away from them and all of this sort of stuff. Essentially, so many parents find it so hard to let go of their idea of the child that they should have, the child that they wanted, which makes it impossible for them to love and accept the child right in front of them. And Naomi details a bunch of examples of parents publicly sharing cases of how they have abused their autistic child, which they see as them just correcting their their traits. Examples of how parents like become obsessive around diet as if that's going to cure their kids' autism. Therapies like ABA, which are basically just teaching kids to mask and be as normal as possible. And I suppose what this chapter in particular, the reason that I found it so confronting and distressing, apart from just like the very literal examples of abuse, was the realization that had my caregivers and the people around me had this word when I was a child, maybe I would have had a more supportive, understanding environment, or maybe some of the people in my life who have shown tendencies and predilections towards conspiracy theory and individualistic thinking around health and wellness. I'm not saying they would have, but there's a chance that those people would have slipped into that same sort of thinking. And they may have even been convinced by these conspiracy circles and their own internalized ableism to try to correct me. So yeah, that chapter in particular has kind of fucked me up a little bit. I'm not gonna lie. I had a good little cry about it after I finished reading that chapter. While I think it's reasonable to grieve for my past self and the unnecessary struggles that she went through, a diagnosis in an inherently ableist world might not have necessarily been my key to acceptance and self-love and whatever. All of that is to say that I feel like I need a break from this book. I mean, already I do feel like this book is doing a hell of a lot, and part of me is impressed by that ambition. The other part of me does feel a little wearied, I suppose, by just like how many threads Naomi is kind of juggling. Sometimes it does feel like it's perhaps a little bit too much. And while she was super sensitive around the way that she spoke about her son, who was the inspiration for this last chapter, I still don't know how I feel that she kind of used him at all. Anyway, all of that is to say that I feel like I need to take a break from this book. And Blair and I are actually going out tonight. I managed to get tickets to, I think it's the Hate Race stage play. The Hate Race is the memoir of one of my favorite authors, Maxine Beneba Clark, of her experience growing up Black in like middle class suburban Australia. And it details her life from when she's quite young to when she's like a young adult. And it's been turned into a performance, into a stage play. And yeah, I managed to get tickets through work. So that's where Blair and I are going tonight. And we're going to go to dinner beforehand. So I'm thinking I might just need to take a break for the rest of the afternoon from reading. And I might just slowly start to get ready and then head into the city to meet Blair.
I don't wanna get too close. I don't wanna lose control. I don't wanna overdose on you. Maybe we can stay this way. Try to keep our feelings safe. I don't wanna lie today.
Good morning. We are here to wrap some presents. My best friend's daughter turned 1 recently, and she's also just been going through a lot health-wise. So it's time for me to send her some books because that's what I do. Jumping Joeys is one of my favorite children's picture books. It's basically a little story about Australian animals, what they get up to at dusk. Then we got another board book. This is called Get Together. This one is very fun. You got to try and figure out what the shapes make, what animals they make. This one's a fish. And then my favorite, which is the one that I picked out for her birthday, Where is Cheeky Monster? This picture book is super fun. It's a story about all of these fun little monsters, but we can't find Cheeky Monster. Where is Cheeky Monster? We've got Busy Monster, always working. We've got Sleepy Monster, dreams all day. We've got Super Monster, but where is Cheeky Monster? And then, of course, right at the end, we've got a mirror. There's Cheeky Monster. It just cracked me up. I love it. Anyway, the stage play last night was wonderful. I really enjoyed it. There was actually like a lot of music in it as well. I felt like it did a really great job of capturing the spirit of the book. Obviously, in an hour-long stage play, they could not include everything. But it definitely captured the feeling of reading the book. And I was just honestly, I mean, I know these people are professionals, but I was honestly just so impressed by how dynamic the play was. Anyway, it was wonderful. I really enjoyed it. Today, I am obviously hoping to get some reading done. And honestly, I would really like to finish Doppelganger today, but I also have a few errands to run. And I'm hoping we can get most of the less fun things out of the way this morning so that I can just relax and read this afternoon. But anyway, I'm sure that vacuum cleaner is really loud, so I'll finish up the wrapping and I'll talk to you later.
I never thought I'd find somebody just like you.
folded laundry together. I could barely get through like 3 or 4 items without my hand just hurting too much. I still do have issues with my hand. The pain is still something that I have to pretty intentionally manage, but clearly I'm doing a lot better. I feel like I had a pretty productive day today. I have done some editing. I've kind of done my first cut through of the video that's supposed to go up tomorrow. I say supposed to because I still have a lot of work left on it. And then I suppose the other thing is I finished Doppelganger, finally. And honestly, I kind of have mixed feelings about it, if I'm being honest with you. I suppose I felt like a lot of the chapters might have been more effective if they had have just been essays. And I think although this whole doppelganger imagery and metaphor that was supposedly bringing the book together, I don't know that it always did so successfully. Some of the chapters really did just feel like tangents, or like they were very loosely tied to the premise of the book, or like she was kind of really forcing it in some cases. Or if not forcing it, it just maybe wasn't the best framing for that particular subject, and yet she wanted to talk about it, so she found a way to connect it to the concept of doppelgangers. Although this whole framing of everything I think was pretty unique, and the way that she brought everything together under essentially the umbrellas of conspiracy and doppelgangers, I don't know that her conclusions were particularly unique. Like, more or less the book ends with a call for collectivism, for compassion, and for community. For all the build-up we did, it didn't feel that satisfying to me in the end. I also do feel like, I mean, obviously she was going for calm and compassion and all of that sort of stuff, but sometimes it felt like she was being a little bit too easy, not necessarily on the people she was talking about, but on some of their ideas. Ollie, what are you doing? You just on my clean clothes? Can you wave? Good girl, Ollie! High five. Yes! Good girl, come on, let's go. Let's go, darling. Hello, friends. We are here to put on a very small amount of makeup. It's almost 40 degrees today, which I think is about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. But Mum and I are going to see the Human League tonight. She bought tickets, I think last year for my birthday. So we're finally getting to go. This will be the second time we're seeing the Human League together, but I'm still so excited. Anyway, I have been thinking a little bit more about Doppelganger. I feel like this video is just going to be a doppelganger video. And I mean, in part, that's great, right? That especially a non-fiction book is getting me thinking so much. And like, it's a book that I want to think about. It's a book that I want to formulate my own ideas and opinions, because I think that's what Naomi Klein is kind of inviting you to do, is to engage with her. But I think what I was trying to get at yesterday, I feel like I'm a little bit clearer on my core issue with the book, I suppose, now. Although, even though I feel like I'm clearer on it, this will be the first time I'm verbalizing it. So let's see how I go. I'll put my mascara on first and then we can try and figure this out together. I know it's a night out with my mum, but that is the best that I'm going to do today. Okay, so Doppelganger. Early on in the book, Naomi Klein basically details what she sees as Naomi Wolf's turning point into alt-right conspiracy theory. Klein kind of sees this as 2 major events occurring very close together. The first being Naomi Wolf's father dying, and this having a really big impact on her, obviously. The second was a big book that she was publishing and that she was doing a bunch of press for. She seemed really excited about this book. On the press tour, she was publicly challenged on one of the core arguments she made. Basically, some of the evidence she was using in this book was false. It was incorrect. The foundations of the book were entirely faulty. And so obviously in the time of Twitter and the internet more generally, she was torn to shreds. And it seems from Klein's perspective, Naomi Wolf was basically welcomed with open arms into the alt-right circles. And so I think because of this, Naomi Klein spends a lot of this book trying to extend a lot of compassion and understanding to Naomi Wolf, almost as if she's trying to not be what the internet leftist cancel culture was to Naomi Wolf at that time. Like, she's trying to criticize Naomi Wolf, but she's taking great pains to ensure that she's doing it the right way, the nice way, which I totally get, and I think in many ways is commendable. Compassion, understanding, empathy, all of these things, great things. But I suppose part of me throughout the book couldn't help but feel that she wasn't really challenging Naomi Wolf on a lot of her original opinions and stances, and she wasn't really diving into the ways in which Naomi Wolf's starting point of politics were flimsy and were at risk of devolving into fascism. Like I've mentioned previously, Naomi Wolf's The Beauty Myth was my first introduction to feminism. And obviously I thought it was great at the time. It opened my eyes to so many things, but I pretty soon moved on from that because The Beauty Myth lacks any intersectional analysis whatsoever. There's no class consciousness in there at all. The Beauty Myth is a very white, feminist, neoliberal perspective on womanhood. And in so many ways, even back then, Naomi Wolf more or less saw the goal of feminism was to allow white women to rise through the ranks of corporate America. So her feminism was, in my point of view now, pretty fucking hollow. We don't really touch on a lot of that until right at the very end of the book, when Naomi Klein finally does talk about the beauty myth and meeting Naomi Wolf back in the day and how some of her politics were quite flimsy even back then, and how the seeds of what she would become were evident even then. Obviously now with hindsight. And so I suppose that conclusion left me feeling a little bit frustrated with the journey that we'd been on with this book. We'd spent 350 pages with Naomi Klein trying to extend empathy and compassion and understanding to Naomi Wolf and trying to understand how the failure of the left maybe pushed her into the open arms of the alt-right, which I'm not saying is not part of it. But in the end, we just kind of came back full circle to the hollowness of Naomi Wolf's ideals in the first place. And it just made me feel like this book was a whole lot of words to essentially say, when you scratch a liberal, a fascist bleeds. Now, all of that is not to say that the discussion in this book was not hugely interesting. I found a lot of it very compelling. But like I've already said, I didn't necessarily find any of it hugely unique or revolutionary. And I think a book that had spent more time on the hollowness of white feminism and the way that white feminists so quickly dive straight into authoritarianism, whether it's J.K. Rowling, whether it's Naomi Wolf, whether it's Posey Parker, white women who believe themselves to be feminist, who have no class consciousness, who have no intersectionality in their politics, who don't really have a whole lot of political values, truly. When those people are challenged, when those people have their pedestals challenged, they very quickly go to conspiracy theory and authoritarianism and fascism at the end of the day. And I think a book about that, really detailing Wolf's descent from that point of white feminism to fascism, would have been much more interesting if it had taken more of that into account, rather than a primary focus on COVID and everything that has happened since then. But with that out of the way, it is time to go meet Mum and go see The Human League. I'm so excited! So The Human League were obviously amazing, and I actually ended up buying myself some merch, which is not something I do very often. I think the only band I have had merch from for a long time is The Cure, who are of course my favourite band and have been since I was like 14. Oh my god, that's almost 20 years. Anyway, existential crisis aside, The Human League were great, and now I have some fun t-shirts. But now to the topic at hand, The Doppelganger. As I mentioned in the introduction, I have actually already spoken about this book quite a bit in another video. I spoke about quite a lot of why I was enjoying the first half in a reading vlog. So if you haven't yet seen that, definitely check it out. I'll leave a link in the cards above for you. I really liked a lot of what Naomi Klein was trying to do. I really liked a lot of the conversations she she brought up. I really liked the way that she dove headfirst into confronting the mirror world, as she called it. The alt-right, conspiracy theory, that kind of whole thing that is happening at the moment. I suppose the thing that I'm still just stuck on is kind of like I spoke about in the last clip where we checked in, was how essentially this book starts out with Naomi Klein taking a guess, taking a stab at what kind of sent Naomi Wolf down the rabbit hole to begin with. And Klein's thesis really rests on this idea that it was Naomi Wolf's experience of being cancelled by the left. And while I can definitely appreciate that being cancelled, I'm sure, especially on like a mass kind of scale like Naomi Wolf was, I'm sure that is hugely unpleasant, horrifying in many ways. And I can see how something like that could be the straw that would break the camel's back. But the whole analogy of the straw breaking the camel's back is that there are a lot of straws already there. And so in many ways, it's pretty unfair, even unreasonable, to blame that one final straw. By Klein's own admission by the end, Naomi Wolf had a history of generalizing, sensationalizing, and we know that politically she aligned with the Democrats, with the neoliberal kind of line of thinking, and that was her brand of feminism. I suppose here's the point. I'm so frustrated by this narrative that it's leftists not being nice enough to liberals that pushes them into the arms of the alt-right. Because so often this conversation is centered around white women, and I feel like there's some massive infantilization going on right there. Like these poor white women just like didn't know what to do with all these bullies coming at them, so they turned to fascism. I'm sorry, but like it does not matter how mean somebody is to me about something I've said or something I've done. I'm not going to be like, you're not being nice enough to me, I'm going to go be a fascist. And ultimately, I just feel like that was something that was kind of lacking from this book. I feel like there was too much of an emphasis on the idea that cancel culture ruined Naomi Wolf, that it's the thing that sent her over the ledge and far into the abyss. And I think because that was such a big part of at least the setup of the book, that is why Naomi Klein spent so much of the book trying so desperately to really empathize with and understand Naomi Wolf's, inner workings and goings on. When I think she could have spent a lot more time critiquing and challenging Naomi Wolf's existing ideology and her history and connecting that history with her current beliefs and actions. And like she does say some of this, right? Like on page 230, she said, I, Naomi Klein, am a leftist focused on capital's ravaging of our bodies, our democratic structures, and the living systems that support our collective existence. Wolf is a liberal who never had a critique of capital. She simply wanted women like her to be free from bias and discrimination in the system so that they could rise as individuals. So it's not as if that critique is not in here. I just wish this had been a much bigger part of the book and she'd gone much further, much deeper into this and much sooner, rather than so much focus on the idea of this amorphous monster coming after everybody that is leftist cancel culture. To me, that is what this book was missing, is that Naomi Wolf was already way, way closer to that end of the spectrum than she was to us over here by the time this inciting incident happened to her. Let's not infantilize her like that and act like she didn't have any agency in the direction she headed after that event. Her ideology right from the beginning, when I read The Beauty Myth, was rooted in white supremacism. It was rooted in capitalism. And she always fetishized the individualistic over the collective. Aside from being mad that the patriarchy was keeping her down, she was never a leftist. So the idea that it is leftist cancel culture that pushed her over the edge, I think is overly simplistic and kind of ridiculous. Now, having said all of that, I really meant it when I said that there was a lot about this book that I really liked and that I really enjoyed and that I found ultimately really thought-provoking. I think there is an awful lot in here to engage with, which is exactly why this video is so damn long. And I think Naomi Wolf has done a great job of diving into the mirror world and really examining it and trying to reflect back what this means for people on the left, both how it reflects a lot of our failures and limitations, but also how it reflects the opportunities we have and where we need to be focused more. But anyway, I could clearly talk about this book all week, and indeed I have. When I started this book, I did not know that I would make an entire video dedicated to it. I thought I'd be reading it in that vlog a couple of weeks ago, and that would be it. And so I just want to reiterate that even though I clearly have some disagreements with this book and that I don't feel like it was perfect, no book is really, I appreciate this book in a similar way that I did with Babel, right? I didn't necessarily love that book as a book, but I loved thinking about it and talking about it. I respect a lot about this book. I like a lot about this book. I enjoyed reading it. And this process of critique and conversation is something I genuinely enjoy. But anyway, thank you so much for hanging out with me this week and letting me chat about this book. As I said, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. As always, a big thank you to my wonderful patrons over on Patreon, and especially big thank you to Livia, Lynette Brown, and Marie. And an extra big thank you to you for making it all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed your time. I will talk to you in the next video. Until then, happy reading. Bye.